Welcome, everybody. So lovely to be with each of you. Yeah, so wonderful. And so I hope you are all doing quite well. Perhaps some of us are getting a taste of springtime. I know it's just mid-February, but I woke up this morning, I heard some birds in the air and they were out just chirping and dancing away, and it really made me smile. Sometimes winter can be very, very hard on the body, on the psyche, on the path. It's nice. I was out riding my bike with my daughter earlier today, and just having a wonderful time. Wonderful time. So I want to remind everyone that the retreat is coming up in a couple weeks here, the first weekend of March. And we will be exploring what it means to be free, especially in regards to a fearless type of freedom. So a freedom that's realized deep in the gut, in the belly. The type of freedom that is necessary for us to live here in a sane way on planet Earth. Now, many of us have had great experiences of lofty and transcendental states of freedom. But what most of us want is a freedom that actually sticks, that is deep, that is in the very fabric and the substance of our being. And for us to awaken to this type of freedom, we have to face our greatest fears. We have to face our everyday fears and everything in between, the mundane and the existential. We must be willing to look at these and ask, is this the truth? Is this the truth? Now, I was walking little doodles the other day, and we were out in the street, a big truck came roaring by, and little doodles ran out of the way. It's a very healthy manifestation of fear. The egoic nervous system hears something loud and frightening and gets out of the way. But for most of us, we struggle with imagined fear. Fear of, this or that happening in the future, fear of something that happened in the past. We feel that it's destroyed our reputation or destroyed some aspect of our life. And when we are fearlessly awake, we're willing to look and see, has this event in the past, has it actually harmed my being, my presence, my essence? Did it actually take something from me? Now, often psychologically, we give something away when fear arises. We give our power away. We give our truth away. We give our direct experience, our contact with our own divinity. We give it away and we align with our egoic nature. And so the retreat coming this March will be an investigation of what does it actually mean to be free in form? What does it mean to be free of this egoic nature? Now, one of the topics of tonight's satsang is, I'm going to invite us all just to look directly in a very basic way. What is the ego? What is my egoic nature? What is it? What is it? Now, we've spoken a lot in the past that the ego is basically the internalized defense mechanism the fight or flight response. And that's what it is on one level. On another level, it's all the stale habits of our personality. And, stale sounds like a harsh word, but to me, it's kind of a fun word. There's been different times in my life when I noticed that the very way that I was relating, for example, to my wife or to my children, was stale. And by that, I mean, it wasn't fresh, it wasn't awake, it wasn't alive. Like one of the games that the ego does is it just loves to be on autoplay, like this autoplay of habits, autoplay or autopilot, where, the ego says like a playlist of, you give it this stimulus and you'll get this response. And when you go home to see your parents or to visit with a brother or sister of yours, someone who you've known for decades, you often see that, okay, if I say this thing, it's going to cause this type of behavior in that person. That's a stale habit. That's a dead habit. There's nothing alive and awake that's animating it. Nothing alive and awake that's animating it. Now, one of the things that that's happening, I just realized this in our country right now, is it's Super Bowl Sunday. I had no idea Super Bowl Sunday because I don't have the habit of football. There's zero football in me, just like none, like none. No, when I was a child, so I had no idea that today was Super Bowl Sunday. I did see some people wearing some jerseys today, but people wear jerseys sometimes, and again, just no idea. But when I was a kid, again, I didn't have the habit either of watching football, following football. But I did have a friend down the street, and he used to come and knock on my door and say, "Hey, Greg, you want to come over and play football?" I'd say, "Yes, of course. I would love to play. I would love to play." See, that I don't have anything against football in any way. But just, as a kid, your body's young and it's growing and it feels so good to play and be embodied. And so, if a neighbor came over and said, "Hey, you want to play?" I'd be like, "Yes, I do." He said, "Do you want to watch it?" "No." And sometimes, friends would, like, I didn't grow up with video games, but I had some friends who grew up with, say a Nintendo or something, the first iteration of that thing. And I wouldn't want to go and play that. Like, I wouldn't want to go and sit in front of a box. But if they wanted to go outside, what was the game when I was a kid? Super Mario Brothers, and jump over things and search for mushrooms in the woods. Yes, I would do that. I would go and jump over things and search for mushrooms. That's all I remember from Super Mario Brothers. Again, I didn't play it, but I just remember little guys who looked like pizza delivery men who were looking for mushrooms, I think. Could be wrong. And so my question to you, and we'll play a game of inquiry right now, is if you want to close your eyes, you feel into your body. And I want you to feel into your egoic nature, your habitual nature, And I invite you just to look just to look and see, like, how does that feel? Your egoic nature, like, what does it feel like? Does your egoic nature, like, what's the texture of it? Is it dense? Is it tight? I mean, for some of us, we might have very open, relaxed egoic nature. But probably right on the edges, you'll notice some level of tension in it. What does my egoic nature feel like directly? And then if you can, I invite you just to put that down completely. And giving yourself permission to just step way back toward the back of the skull. And then maybe even imagine just like there's a trap door behind you, behind the back of the skull. You walk through that door, opening into a space, like 360 awareness. This is an aspect of being, a vast, spacious being. And we're going to inquire, and I'm going to ask you, well, what does that feel like directly? What does that feel like when you give yourself permission to open, to expand? What does that feel like? What is the experience of that? And for some of you, if I invite you to come back to your normal, everyday egoic consciousness, you may notice that it feels like a shell. A shell within this vastness. Now, the shell of your ego, it cannot cover the vastness. If we're directly experiencing the vastness. But I invite you just to notice your ego and see if you notice what I notice, that the ego, it feels like a shell. Or we often use the word mask. But often we think of a mask as something that's right on our face. I did this funny thing a couple of weeks ago. I was putting up mud, plaster in my house. And I just covered my hoodie in the plaster. And anyways, it's a big mess, and I didn't want to wash it in the washer because I didn't want to ruin the washer. So I took it outside and I washed it in a bucket. And then I hung it on my motorcycle to dry, just like on the handlebars of my motorcycle. And I came out the next day, and that hoodie, the sweatshirt, the jacket, was completely frozen. Like it was this frozen form. And often I think that's how our ego feels. It's just like it's semi-rigid structure. But if you look inside it, there's nothing real there. And so again, I invite you just to notice as we're inquiring, how does my egoic identity feel? Like, how does it feel on a level of sensation? Does it feel dense? Does it feel rigid? For some of us, our egoic identity feels like a spinning whirlwind of chaos. And I could ask you, well, what is the emotion of your egoic identity? Is there just one emotion there? Is there multiple emotions? And can you feel and can you notice how the emotions of your egoic identity bring forth feelings of walls or boundaries within this greater spaciousness that you are? So let's see if we can do that. Let's see if we can feel this expansive quality of being. And feel or experience like a shell of ego or a mask, a mold, like a cast within this spaciousness. And then if we give ourselves permission just to focus more on space, and how about if I ask you, what does your heart feel like? Your true heart, not the egoic heart, but your true heart. Can you experience the radiance, the aliveness, the compassion of your true heart? Can you experience that directly? You might just take a couple breaths there. Feeling and experiencing. Sensing into our true heart. And as you feel into your true heart, you may notice that your attachment or your connection with egoic identity begins to soften, begins to melt. The boundaries that are made, the imagined boundaries that are made by ego, by this cast, by this mold, by this shell, begin to melt. Begin to melt. So at first, as we stepped into spaciousness, you may have noticed you just kind of see your ego. Maybe it melts a little bit, but not much. But as we welcome the quality of heart, the quality of compassion, you may notice that mask really melting. Really beginning to melt like let's have some fun, a chocolate bar on a hot day. Chocolate bar sitting on the dashboard of your car on a hot day. And so more and more, as this compassion comes online, this spaciousness and this radiance, our egoic identity begins to melt. You may notice some other layers of ego coming online, or some other experiences, like maybe there was just tension when we began. But as you open, you might see that under that tension, or making up that tension, is sadness or angst or vengeance, righteousness, heartache, despair, craving, addiction, wanting to move or shift. And again, if we give ourselves permission just to open, inquiring more directly into true nature, into this space that is awake, as we open into this space that is loving, and this space that is quietly fearless. The fearless is the part of you that's rooted, that continues to show up. It did not run away. Chose to be curious and play along. So as we open into the depth and the truth of what we are, and one more time, look at our egoic identity, how it's changed, how it's softened. And if we look at the direct experience of how the ego feels, now that it has been in contact with the truth of what you are. And so I'm going to ask you, like, what changed? What shifted? What was your experience in this activity of opening to space and opening to love, fearlessly embracing our egoic nature and egoic identity? I'm going to ask you, well, what has your experience been? And if you feel inspired, you can just write a little something in the chat. You'll see how you all are playing along. And a great question, to continue to play with is, well, which part of me is the real me, the true me? Which part, which experience? The part that's tense, the part that lives in habit, the part that's guarded, or the part that's open? Which is the real you? Which one do I consciously choose to be? Which one do I consciously choose to be? And so you can open your eyes if you like. And I invite you to share a little bit. Again, if you feel inspired, just to write a little something about what your experience has been. Jan writes, as much as it is a relief to open, the unboundedness of the openness seems to accentuate the pain of that stale rigidity, which seems still to remain. Yeah. So maybe this is from, I'm not sure if this is from Jan or Don. They use the same computer, but this is one of the truths. This is one of the reasons as well. Like I did a little, we spoke about this in Satsang last week. One of the reasons many people don't open to emptiness, to spaciousness, is because it will temporarily accentuate your pain. Like when we are mindful, we might notice like, oh my gosh, I'm in pain. But if we're not mindful, if we're just, sitting on the couch, watching some fantasy football team, and it being that like all football teams are fantasy, it's just a game, and just eating a whole bag of chips, and we're just distracting ourselves from our pain, just like covering that hungry ghost with chips and dip. I think that's what people do at Super Bowl parties. I don't think I've actually ever been to a Super Bowl party. So, but we can just use our mind. We can use our habitual nature to constantly avoid our life and our feeling. And some people are really successful at it. Very successful at not feeling really what's happening within them, but feeling just kind of, it's like a base level dread. And sometimes when we do something like go on a meditation retreat, spend a day in silence, if we get stuck somewhere without our phone, without our car, without a device to distract us, and it's just us and our mind, if we open this spacious emptiness, we might notice, well, there's a lot of pain here. A lot of pain. And so a great question to ask, if we open to spaciousness and we notice that our ego is rigid and stale, a great question to ask is, where's the love? And by that, I mean, where's the love of your heart? Where's the love of your heart? And can you connect to that love? And often, as we connect to this love, it might even hurt even more. But as we take a step further, opening deeper and more fully into a compassionate love and embracing love, inviting this love to embrace the rigidity, we might begin to notice the rigidity softening. Softening. And if it doesn't begin to soften very shortly, within a short duration, I encourage you to ask that rigidity, ask it, to look at it, to speak to it like it was a child that you care about. And ask it, what is this rigidity about? What's this rigidity about? Giving yourself permission to be intimately friendly. What is this rigidity about? What is this tension about? And then to take some deep, full breaths, like right into the heart of the tension. letting it know that, hey, I see you and I love you. And I'm concerned that you're so rigid when there's no danger. Again, I like to look around, but there's no danger. Now, when I'm on the walk with my little friend Doodles, and a big Dodge Cummins diesel drives by, Doodles might tense up for half a second, and then he springs forward with all 4 feet, getting the heck out of the way. And so that tension is him bringing like all his energy to his center, to his fight or flight. He's saying, okay, it's go time. And then he springs out of the way. But human beings, we see something scary and then we freeze. We freeze and we stay frozen. And if we try to heal this frozenness just with spaciousness, it's probably not going to work. It might soften a little bit. But for something to really, like for rigidity to really thaw, we need to open to love. And Jan or Don, whoever wrote this, if we're having trouble finding love within our own heart, that's a moment that we can call upon the Divine Mother to come into us, to help melt this pain, to help melt this pain. Okay. And we keep opening it. We stay with it until it melts. Until it melts. And that may be 10 breaths, it may be 100, maybe 100,000. And this is, really one of those questions of spiritual awakening, the question of embodiment. How much do I care to embody? If I care to embody the truth, if I want to truly awaken to the truth and live it, we stay with that rigidity until it fully melts, however long it takes. And that's that kind of that archetypal or mythical story of the Buddha under the Bodhi tree. It's like, I'm just going to sit here until I'm done. I'm done with this thing. And as the story goes, like the myth, it happened in the night, but really it happened probably over a decade or more, give or take. Melting all his rigidity. Okay, Kyle writes, one of my biggest influences lately comes from my superego, which wants awakening to look a certain way for me rather than having the courage to even surrender that. Yeah, that's a beautiful thing to see, Kyle. A beautiful thing to see that. Like many of us, myself included, I had the first decade or so of the spiritual path, I just had all these myths of what awakening was supposed to look like, feel like. And sometimes I had really big experiences that reinforced that. Oh, it's supposed to be big and vast and, ecstatic all the time. But to truly be awake means that you see things as they are. And sometimes the things you see are heavy and dense. Sometimes you see that being human is really hard. And yet there is space here, there is light here, there is love here. And sometimes it's incredibly blissful and full of amrita. But all of this arises in the perspective of space, the perspective of love, and the perspective of indestructibility. By perspective, I mean the directness of it, direct experience of that. Justina writes, my ego is tense, fearful, controlling, and then it's softened and mostly let go. in the love and the peace of my true being. Yeah, beautiful. My ego, Catherine writes, my ego is also anxious, scared, and searching. Then when I was in my heart, she softened and admitted she just wanted to be useful and of service. Yeah, this is beautiful what Catherine wrote, because often we're so dismissive of our egoic nature and our egoic identity. But when we follow a path of Tantra, Tantra is this, it's this red fire, this blazing fire. And this fire, it's a fire of transformation. It's a fire of transformation. And with the fire of transformation, it can take something, something that we might call ego. And as it cooks it, we begin to see that there are greater truths at the heart of the ego. On the surface of the ego, it's just tends to be fight or flight and habit, and not much that's really deep. But when you cook the ego in this tantric fire pit inferno, these greater truths begin to come to the surface, that our ego, there's parts of it that just want to serve and be useful. And if you let that cook even further, you'll see that there's little slivers of individual essence, like the essence of your gift, the essence of this energy of seva, of wanting to serve, wanting to bring forth God's evolution here on planet Earth. And that's a beautiful thing. And so in these teachings, the ego is not some bad, dirty monster. It's a confused monster. A confused monster. But as you begin to work with the monster, you see there's all these aspects of power, all these slivers of divine essence, places that were disconnected from the truth. But are wanting to reconnect to it and wanting to express the truth in this world. So the more you work with the ego, the more it dissolves into a healthy sense of humanity. The more you open to that and work with that, it starts to move into the direct experience of various qualities of divinity, of essence. Okay. David writes, the ego felt the fragile nervous shell inside my upper chest and throat, smaller than my bigger body. With my heart expansive, it felt like it was dissolving. One of the reasons that I like the word shell for our egoic nature is when we look at the core of the ego, like the core of, say, this program of fight, flight, defensiveness, guardedness. See that right in the center of it, the primal ego. There's just an absolute realm of insecurity because there's nothing actually real. At the heart of it, at the root of it, at the root of this feeling of separation, and then this wanting to guard and defend ourselves against life. The great just insecurity there. That's what drives the fight or flight response. And most people are so utterly identified with that. that great like pit of insecurity. They don't know if I surrender that, if I melt the boundaries of that, if I try something different than that dance, what's right on the other side of a great pit of insecurity is this vast expanse of nature that is one with all of life. So if you give yourself permission to fall through the bottom of the pit of insecurity, we open to the direct experience of Buddha nature, the groundless ground. Okay. Melania writes, my ego is full of rage, ready for war. I love it. My muscles are clenched and on guard. There's judgment there around it. Then in my heart, there's peace, stillness, and calm. My muscles relax and I feel safe. Yeah. Yeah. And for some of us, like when we've been through a great deal of difficulty in life, or some of us have a fiery nature, and we're just like ready to fight, ready to throw down. And it's important. It can be helpful. It can be, we can bring forth a great deal of sanity when we meet this fire with love, with some energy of the heart, some tenderness and softness. It can help to balance out some of that primal rage that wants to kill. That wants to kill. And so, this is a great practice of just keep opening to that love and inviting the love to hold, to embrace, to merge into that fire, that heat, and even the rage. And sometimes we find that rage may not completely disappear, but it may soften into anger. But if we continue to meet it with love, that may soften into this energy of, like in Zen, it's often called the energy of Manjushri, this energy of swift, decisive action. It's kind of a sword that cuts through craft in life, but can do so in a loving way, fierce, true, but a loving way, where it's, by love, there's a smile there. It's in alignment with the truth. It's doing what's best for you, and then actually for everyone. Sometimes rage is just pointing. It's like the ego's way of pointing that there's something here that really needs to be looked at. But again, we don't always have to choose the ego's way. If we bring the heart into that rage and throw it in that tantric inferno, we let it burn and cook for a little bit. Often we open into this swift, decisive action, which is quite necessary for life on planet Earth. Okay. I had a couple email questions. So I'll get to those. And then if anyone has a question, you can raise your hand. To find those questions. Hi, Craig. Could you speak a bit about stepping into... No, wait, I did that one last week. Let me find the right one. Okay. Hi, Craig. I get body reactions if I meditate. How do I discriminate if it's kundalini energy or prana energy? Yeah, this is a question from Anton. Yeah, so both words, we have to be careful here. Both words, basically translate as the energy of life force. Now, kundalini is life force. It's much more explosive. So if you're saying you get body reactions, if I meditate, I assume you mean the body's moving around or dancing around, jumping, moving, twitching, doing a little something, having kriyas. That's almost always going to be kundalini. Prana energy just tends to radiate. Just tends to be very like a subtle radiating energy. If any of you saw, like I woke up this morning and I was just looking for some music to play. And I was on YouTube, and so Krishna Das was doing a live performance from Aurobindo. It's a little intentional community outside of the Aurobindo ashram, outside of Pondicherry in India. And there was just this wonderful flow of prana just coming as he's singing. There's a very subtle, wondrous, radiating flow of prana that just flows out in a very healing and beautiful way. Kundalini's energy tends to go up the spine, tends to be forceful, can be wild, can be intense, that type of thing. And so, I don't know if that's helpful for you. There's another question here. Let's see if I can find it. Gosh. I know I put it in here somewhere, but I'm just having trouble. So anyways, let's see here what Lucas writes. I feel something like an intense hunger or craving deep down, and I tend to tense around it, to not having to feel it, because often it feels overwhelming. Yeah. Lucas, I invite you to open to this. And so we can all play along. If any of you have tension anywhere in the body, and if you feel something intense or craving, if we open the door to our closet and see if we have any skeletons in there, are any of these skeletons hungry? Can we open the door to them? Begin to breathe some air, some space, the energy of daylight into the closet. And just seeing what begins to happen. When I open to this craving. I open to this hunger. Does this hunger have an emotion? Does it have a memory that it's connected to? Something deep in the past? What does this craving remind you of? And whatever comes forward, whether it's an emotion or old memory or we can ask the most compassionate question: what do you need? How can I love you? And are you willing to see? Are you willing to hear? Are you willing to experience this skeleton? Inviting the skeleton to talk to you and tell you, share with you. Maybe it's surface level truth. Like, I'm hungry. And we can ask it an emotional truth that it has. It might tell you, I'm hurting, and here's how, or here's why. And as we look again with new eyes, with fresh eyes, with awake, compassionate eyes, we can ask it, how can I help you? What do you need me to change or do differently? Or how can I be supportive to you? It might tell you it wants to be seen, or met with love. Sometimes these things tell us that they just want to run. Like I've had many skeletons within me that are just, all they wanted to do was want to open the door to the closet and let them run. Let them run, be like, I just run wild for a period of time and burn themselves out. Burn themselves out. And so I'm curious, like, what is it? Like, what is it wanting? What is it needing? And do we trust that it's safe to let these things run empty? It's safe to feed them our attention, our light, our space, and an immense love and compassion. And sometimes it might just, I need more and more and more love. I need a tremendous amount of love. I've suffered here so long. And sometimes you'll see, if you see a skeleton at first, as you breathe love into the skeleton begins to take on form and actually maybe smile or have a heart, or might tell you something that's been repressed that wants to come forward. Like some aspect of your gift or your divinity that's been repressed or ignored and it's wanting to come online. May tell you it's just been hurting really bad. It needs just someone to really hold it and be with it. And so can we listen? Can we open? Can we be with? Transmuting our experience. So anyways, Lucas, thank you for sharing. Okay. All right, a couple questions here. I just ask that they are short, clear, and direct. Short, clear, and direct, please. And yeah, we'll hear from Terry.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Terry.
Hi, Craig. A couple of years after the initial thing that happened, I started feeling energy in the body, right? And now it's just gone. So every time I have an emotion, just like we're talking today, or something, some shadow thing or whatever you want to call it comes up, and it's a difficult emotion, and I'm always going, okay, I'm opening to this, I'm letting it happen and stuff. It goes on for like a day at least, if not more. And it's like this vibrating energy. I guess I'm just trying to understand, is this normal? What is this? You were saying prana, kundalini. I never thought of it as kundalini, but you said prana is subtle and stuff. I don't know. It's just like, whoosh, just keeps going up and going up and going up.
Yeah, so okay, so good. That's what I was going to ask you. So that's kundalini. That's kundalini. And kundalini wants to awaken and it wants to flow forever. Forever. And so if you look at, say, for example, the Big Bang, the universe, like the universe is just expanding infinitely, and it's flowing just forever. But there's no one there resisting it. There's no one there fighting with it. There's no one there judging it. And there's space there. There's space for it to flow into. So again, no problem. Now with Kundalini, when there's a problem, it's almost always because there's a boundary there and one isn't recognizing or isn't connecting fully to the space. And so then it creates this thought it shouldn't be here, or it should run itself out, or any kind of thought of resistance. I don't like this. I don't like the way it feels. But when we give ourselves permission to be big and to be vast and to be empty, and to be true means we acknowledge what's here. If there's a force within us that's running, well, the truth is, if something's here that's running, we let it run. And we see there's space for it to run. There's space for it to run. We don't interfere with the running. We trust in it. We trust in it. And so, I invite you just to play with it, just to play with trusting and letting it run. And like our ego, it likes to control things. It doesn't like it when there's something within us that we don't understand. Now, true nature doesn't judge things it doesn't understand. It sees them as a manifestation of the mystery of God. And the more we let go and trust in the mystery, the more we become one with the thing that's running. We just become one with everything. And as you become one with everything, like from an egoic perspective, that could be hell. But from a divine perspective, a true nature perspective, like when you become one with something that's infinitely running, and you're one with spaciousness and boundlessness, you're one with compassion. And this energy that's running, it's just a force of energy. It's like a well, it's like a fountain that's overflowing. It's not a problem. But the ego says, I know what I am this thing, and I've been this way, and I felt this way, and I know what I feel like. I don't know what this other thing feels like, or this other thing feels weird, it feels bizarre, it feels strange. Like when my Kundalini first woke up, it felt like it's like 1,000 racehorses were running in me. And when it first woke up, it was very chaotic. It felt like they were running in all different directions. And it was just like, oh my God, what's going on? And it was just like crazy. But I chose to walk the path of trust with my experience instead of walking the path of resistance. And again, it was wild, it was bizarre, it was confusing. But eventually these energies, they ran in all different directions, and then they started to run in one direction. And then this energy began to be invigorating, and then quite blissful. Quite blissful. It didn't start off as quite blissful. It started off quite wild. Quite wild. So anyways, I encourage you to play with this. Play with this and just see how it goes, or see where it goes. And to talk to the energy, just say like, well, what do you want to teach me? Like, what are you here to show me? What are you here to teach me? What are you here to show me? And often spiritual energies like this will teach us something that we weren't expecting, like you are the Big Bang. Like that's nothing I would ever expected to realize or to know myself as the Big Bang. I thought kundalini was something different. Some different kind of thing, some yogic science of some sort. But you know, as I opened to it, it's one of the great things it showed me. It's like, you are the Big Bang, literally. And it's like, oh wow. Like, wow. Wow. And it's all you can say is wow, because you can't latch onto it, you can't make any identity around it, but it's just a sense of, and allowing the Big Bang just to continue into infinity and infinity. Now, paradoxically, that's a different realization that I had. You know, like on the flip side of it was like, you are the explosion, that's the Big Bang, but also I've had the realization you are the implosion, where just like life sucks back to a 0 point. And that one was just equally bizarre and confusing. It's like, what the heck do you do with that? You can't do anything with it. That you are the explosion of everything, and then you are the implosion of everything, which is nothing. Nothing. And there's other realizations. Like you are the absolute existence, and you are non-existence. And again, these things, like our human self can't do anything with them. That's the beautiful type of realizations, because our human self can't do anything with them. But often God just does is just keeps opening and showing us these different aspects of what it is that we are. But if we're afraid to be no thing, and if we're afraid to be, I'll say it this way, this will sound terrible, the death of everything. You are the death of everything. Again, your consciousness could be so fluid and so dynamic and so otherworldly. But when you start waking up to something like non-existence, it's like it's a giant eraser that erases huge chunks of your egoic nature. And there's a different type of freedom in that. Like most people like a blissful freedom. But how about a freedom where we're so free that we can not only not exist, we can not exist, but we can be non-existence itself. Again, these are more kind of bizarre states of consciousness, but I call them bizarre. Bizarre. If you're at a human form and you start having these types of things, it's could be unsettling. But again, one of the things we'll speak about in this upcoming retreat is this unsettledness. Like the ego likes to hold on to things that I like this, I don't like this feels good. You know, Kyle wrote this spiritual awakening is supposed to feel this certain way. And the direct experience of enlightenment, it's true, it's going to feel all kinds of ways. It's going to be all kinds of qualities. Experiences of divinity, the way the divine expresses itself in you, through you, as you. So anyways, okay, let's hear from Aaron. Yeah.
Hey.
Hi, Aaron, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Hey, everyone. gosh, excuse me. Craig, I more want to have a little bit of a back and forth here as my process is unfolding. I kind of want to get like a, oh yeah, that's great, or oh yeah, maybe a little bit of this, or that kind of thing. Where I'm at right now is like I appreciate that there's a more transpersonal quality to what I'm experiencing. And so it's very apparent that the thing is bigger than the me. Like, I don't know that I'm that thing yet, but what's coming online is bigger. And that's new. And it's also quite apparent that, and this is the interesting part, the whole samsara thing is maybe making a lot more sense to me, in that my mind will be doing something and I'll recognize in the moment, like, oh man, it's like, this isn't real. This is just this. And then it's just kind of the isness, or just what's here, like very simple, not too cosmic or anything, very simple. But that immediate distinction between what my mind is making of something in the moment and then just like, whoa, what's here is like, whoa, that's something. And then that leads me into the place of like, I'm just curious. I mean, I know that you're quite far along the path, but you know, when the mind is beginning to drop away a little bit, or very much so loosen, that this distinction becomes very clear, at least it is for me right now. Are you just kind of living in more or less a kind of flow state, not lots of thought, like life isn't being directed by thought? I understand that's never the case, but it's how it seems to be at a certain point. Yeah, so there we go.
Yeah, so you're saying that your consciousness is expanding, and as it's expanding, there's a quality of consciousness, a quality of awareness that's coming online, where you see through samsara very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And there's this felt sense quality of the like, oh yeah, this isn't the thing. It's just so clear. Yeah.
And you know, there's this quality of there's this like the word I'm hearing is like a self-liberation of the mind. So you might see, like, as consciousness expands, like that's a beautiful thing. There's this aspect of awakening that comes online where you may begin to have a thought, and you see the thought and you see it's samsara, and that cuts through it, that helps it to dissolve. That's one thing. But another thing that can happen, and tell me if this is happening with you, is the thoughts themselves come forward, but within the fabric of the thoughts themselves, they begin to self-liberate, like they begin to dissolve from within themselves. So are you seeing the thought and seeing that it's not true? And so through clarity, say that you are giving to it, it's dissolving. Is it that? Or is the thought coming forward and it's just self-liberating on its own?
So I definitely get the distinction, and I think it's much more the first, though what I will say about the second is that though I wouldn't say it's self-liberating on its own, there is a quality as things are arising in the space of like how they soften.
Yeah.
And kind of, so not self-liberating, that would be too far, but like there's almost a quality of that in a nascent way.
Yeah. Well, anytime we're spacious, you know, or spaciousness is here, there's going to be that quality of just, it's going to help everything to soften. And that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And there could be this clarity that comes online, and the clarity is nice when it's there, because well, our life is just a disaster when we don't have the clarity to see, oh yeah, like this is samsara. And it's nice because if we allow there to be some heart there,
Right.
Clarity has a softness to it, because a lot of people get into like they have like a harsh clarity that comes with like kind of like a non-dual harshness and judgment and coldness, and they make a wrong, they make this thing like life is wrong, every thought we have is wrong. And so I encourage you not to go down that road if there's any of that there. Just, we want to always make sure, if we're seeing, when we are seeing, there's some quality of heart there. And with a quality of heart there, it's going to be more loving, more tender, and it's going to invite like this whole thing to start to speed up.
Yeah.
So anytime there's love, like love tends to, it just speeds up the path. And if we latch onto a harshness or wrongness or judgment, any kind of spiritual judgment of our human self, then that can be dangerous. If we're putting everything in the category of samsara, and it's wrong, and everything's a shadow, and everything's bad because I had a thought, and it's like, no, like with this quality of heart, it has a quality of greater inclusivity to it. It really softens things up. And then what you begin to see is, and Catherine had a little glimpse of this in what she wrote, of where the ego starts to move into a realm of self-liberation, and then thoughts start to move in a realm of self-liberation, where they start to see, oh my God, it hurts so much to be thinking the way I'm thinking. So like the liberation starts to happen from within the thing. And so instead of there being two things, like me witnessing something and I see it's wrong, and now I'm being freed of it, or I'm freeing myself from it through clarity. When there's this full inclusivity of your egoic nature, and even just like, let's just say of any random thought, like if you fully include it, from this space of great love, and there's a fearlessness about it. Like there's not a fear that thoughts are obstacles and they're bad and they're wrong, so they shouldn't be here. But there's a fearlessness which includes it. Often these things, they'll start to just start popping and self-liberating. And that can be wonderful, because then the one who's awake, I don't have to see every single thing and see the foolishness in it and then do the work of liberation. It starts to self-liberate. And
no, that's exactly what's happening right now. That's exactly.
Yeah.
So totally. And that's what makes it so sweet. And that's kind of what I wanted to get a sense of. So in fact, I feel like I was probably in that first place before, where there was more of a distinction between whatever's awake and what's arising. But now it just like, that thing is not so vigilant. So it's like almost a softening of the superego. And there's a tremendous quality of heart present. And so it's just like things, in fact, it's just the opposite of what you're talking about. Because it's like this whole layer of like, wow, I'm an incredibly judgmental person came forward. And it was really beautiful to see that. Like, whoa, I didn't even see how much judgment was here on myself and on other people. And it just comes up and I don't even know what's holding it. I think that's part of why I'm bringing it forward right now. And it feels a little like, and I'm able to let go into it. So it's not too destabilizing, but it's like, wow, what even is doing this at this point?
Yeah. That's where we, I encourage you to take some ownership of that. Say like, this space is me. This space is the I. So often we think of I as like something like here in the head, but like in the yogic realms, there's like all these teachings like I am that, and, I am the Atman and this and that. But the I, like a true I in the yogic realms, is not like something here on the forehead and it's seen, it's witnessing. It's vast, it's expansive, it's soft. It's a thing that's permanent. And so if you notice, like if we just notice, well, what's permanent about my consciousness? Space, spaciousness, emptiness. So one of the things that's really permanent about us, this quiet sense of, radiance. That's the love, and again, we make it a little more grounded. It's the permanent part. That's the horror part. That's the part that's just, it's here. Like, this thing is spacious and it's radiant. That's the I. That's the I. But most of us think the I is the superego, and then we become spiritual, then it's the spiritual superego. We think that's what the I is. It's like, well, you get to choose what the I is. You want the I to be the space, and the space is holding it. Do I need to be afraid of the I that I am? Well, no, like, I don't need to be afraid of this I that I am. But if we stay in like some kind of, like, even just a spiritual witnessing state, and we're witnessing that there's spaciousness here, but we haven't stepped into the spaciousness and owned it. And by owned it, it's really, it owns us.
Right.
It owns us. And so we just dissolve into it. But if we allow ourselves to be owned by it, and then we just live as that, and then it begins to become uncommon. If we get comfortable being owned by it, then it is uncommon for us to come into our ego. And then when we come into our ego, we're like, oh my gosh, there's so much walls in here. Like, I don't want to be these walls. Of course, I want to be the bigness. I am the bigness.
Right.
It's like, do you want to go back to middle school? No, no, I don't want to go back to middle school. I don't want to go back to a place with walls and rules, and I don't want to raise my hand to go to the potty. Like, I want to be what I am. I don't want to be limited. I want to be unlimited.
Yeah.
So,
And just maybe one last thing here to make this super practical for me is that, so I hear that, and I think I've always been kind of under the impression that the big thing needs to wake up to itself. That's not really something I have control over, but I do remember someone or you talking last time about making the point like, oh, if you want to be that, put your intention there. And is that more or less what you're telling me? Like, put my intention there, be the thing, have the
put your intention there. Put your, I'll take more than an intention, your sense of self, your identity, like, place your identity there, your awareness there. Because we can be aware, like, from the context of the mind, or we can be aware from the context of the space. Both are us. One is an aspect of us, and one is what we are. And so if we want to be in an aspect of our being, just rest in egoic nature. That's what everyone chooses. But if you want to be in the fullness of what you are, rest in space.
Right.
And it could be just a fun question, like, what is life like when I live from space, when I live as space? What is life like if I live from and as space? Like, what is that like? Yeah. And then later, say tonight, if you find yourself in your egoic mind, you just ask yourself, what is life like right now if I live from and as this space? And you see, like, that's what the inquiry was about today. It was like, what does it feel like when I'm in my ego? It feels like walls, boundaries, tension. It feels like a shell. What does it feel like when I'm in space? Oh, now choose one. Choose one. And in a sense, like, spiritual awakening is a choice.
Right.
It's a choice. Where do I put my attention? Where do I place my identity? Some people right now, they're identifying as who's in the Super Bowl? Is it the Chiefs and someone else? And so I'm choosing to identify as this team, the Chiefs. I hope it's the Chiefs. I'm choosing to be the Chiefs. But like, we don't have to choose that. We can choose to be no team. We can choose to be all teams. We can choose to be everything. It's like we can choose
Nice.
what to be.
Okay.
What to be.
Yeah, super helpful, Craig. That brings me right to my edge. So that's what I'll be playing around with. Thanks a lot.
People get real silly about this, spiritual people. I did. It's like, oh, am I allowed to be big? Like, am I allowed to take up space? Am I allowed to be, I would never have said this, but there was this unconscious, like I'm not allowed to be enlightened, but I am allowed just to be like an eternal student of my teacher forever. At some point I was like, no, I'm allowed to be awake. Like it seems silly to say it, but am I allowed to be what I am? Yeah, but like we have, again, like within that egoic shell is there's these, we put limits on ourselves. And sometimes it's just that. It's us who's limiting us.
Yeah.
It's us who's limiting us. And, we go to all kinds of things like, awareness needs to wake up to itself. Like we can go into that kind of realm, but like, I don't want to go there in this moment. I want to just go to, from one perspective, it's we choose to be a limited small ego, but we don't have to. But often we make that choice out of fear. Make that choice out of fear.
Right.
Because I'm afraid if I'm big, well, then people might see me, they might judge me, they might reject me. For my little cross, I don't have my cross. I think it's behind me somewhere. But we're afraid if we say I'm big, if we say I'm the son of God, they're gonna throw me on that cross. And your ego will go on the cross and it will dissolve into fire. But true nature doesn't necessarily have to go on that cross. True nature can just be what it is. Be what it is.
That's so helpful. I really needed to hear that. I think the last thing that I'll say is what's really sweet about this place is that I find myself naturally and organically being more of who I am at a human level.
Exactly.
In a very natural way. And it's so sweet to see.
Yeah.
It's so sweet to see.
It's a relief. It's a relief because it's like, oh, I get just be me. I get to be in all my human self.
Exactly.
And also is all my divinity and everything in between. And like, none of it has to be wrong. None of it has to be wrong.
No, that's right. That's right.
Beautiful. Good to see you, Aaron.
Thank you. Good to see you too.
Of course. Okay. All right. We'll do one more. Don, I just asked that it's quick, just due to the time.
Real brief. It's right up from what you were saying with Aaron, and it's a question about effort and the way that you invited us today to shift from the rigid, still place of ego to that openness, love, presence. Yeah. So here it is. It comes spontaneously during the day. Just I'm wrapped up in staleness and rigidity and boundaries, and what's here? It opens. So here's the question. When it happens spontaneously, just the way Aaron was describing, it feels beautiful. At that moment, it's staying open. What is the role? It feels somehow it's wrong to try to sustain it, to make a choice. I'm going to make a choice to stay, to keep my attention there. So
So tell me why.
Why is it wrong?
Yeah. That part of you could speak. Why is it wrong to keep my attention on this state of spontaneously being relaxed, open, spacious, free?
It feels like it's a effortful, artificial clinging to that. It feels like it's turning that spontaneous mystery into.
Okay, good. Yeah. Good. So you straighten me out because I misunderstood you a little bit there. So with that efforting part of you,
right?
If you look at that part, and basically ask it, what does it need? So it's telling you on the surface, like, I'm needing to be enlightened forever.
Right.
Right? But if we look a little deeper, because when the efforting part of us wants to be enlightened forever, that is really a manifestation of the fight or flight response. Or the pleasure principle. It's more like, I just want to feel pleasurable all the time, is what it's really saying. So if we ask it, that part of us that's grasping, in a loving way, like, what do you need? Is to put your guard down? What do you need to be relaxed and open? Like, what do you need?
Yeah. Yeah. It's wanting to avoid pain.
It's wanting to avoid pain. Now listen, that's the first teaching of the Buddha, is like, there's no avoidance of pain. Like, life is dukkha, that life is going to be painful. Life is going to be painful. And so I'm going to ask you, like, if you want to be free, are you willing to feel and experience everything without avoiding any of it?
Including feeling the fear and the grasping and the craving.
Yeah. I said willing to feel everything. So that's going to include everything.
I don't want to feel that.
Well, and so that's the math. So that's the basic math. That's the equation right there. If I don't want to feel something within me, I will not be awake.
Yeah.
So to be awake is basically to be a sun, and the sun shines on everything. Everything is in the light. Because everything is in the light, you experience everything. You feel everything. So if we have a bias, if we have a bias, is, I don't want to feel this, it's just not going to work. It's not going to work. And so we do the math of compassion and say, oh, okay, like, the way through this, the way to get what I want is through fearlessly feeling and opening to all that's here. All that's here. Yeah. Yeah. Well, beautiful, Don. Beautiful. So good to be with you. Okay. All right. I think we did it. I remind everyone to sign up for the retreat if you haven't yet. Please don't everyone wait till the end and then you're telling me you don't have the link for the retreat. So sign up sooner rather than later, please, and thank you. If you need a scholarship, just let me know, and I want you to come. So I just ask for a scholarship if you need one. It's been so nice to be with you on. I've been so touched by the sharing today, and the openness and the willingness just to play along with this thing we call the spiritual path. And so my heart is with each of you. Good night, everyone. Much love. See you soon.